I thought I was picking up my wife from a party, but when I opened the taxi door, I found her straddling another man. That moment changed everything, and what came next? No one saw it coming. Imagine realizing your wife has been spending your hard-earned money to carry on behind your back, and all of it comes to light because of one unexpected cab ride in the middle of the night. What I uncovered that night turned my entire world upside down and pushed me to take a kind of revenge I never imagined I was capable of. My name's Mark, and I've been married to my wife, Emily, for the last 7 years. On the outside, we looked like your typical married couple. Two people who met, fell in love, and built what we thought was a life worth holding on to. We didn't have children yet, though we'd been trying. I honestly believed we were happy. Maybe I was just naive, too comfortable, or maybe I just didn't want to see what was really going on. Recently, though, things started to feel off. Emily, who used to be so full of life and warmth, had become distant, like a shadow of the woman I married. We used to share everything. Those slow Sunday coffee runs, cozy movie nights curled up on the couch, little moments that made life feel right. But she started spending more time away from home, always saying she needed some space to clear her head. I tried to be supportive. I figured we all hit rough patches now and then, times when we need a little breathing room. But this didn't feel like just a phase. Emily began acting differently, more guarded, more secretive. Her phone was always on silent, always face down, and she'd leave the room every time it rang. I don't really know what I expected when I began piecing things together, but nothing could have prepared me for what I ended up discovering. What happened next didn't just break me, it changed the entire course of my life. And honestly, I'm still trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. It was a Friday night when Emily told me she was heading out to a party with some friends. That wasn't out of the ordinary. She's always been the social type, and I never wanted to be the husband who questioned her every move. She dressed up nicely that evening, just the right amount of makeup, her favorite scent trailing behind her. Before walking out the door, she gave me a quick kiss and said, "Don't stay up. I might be late tonight." I figured I'd just spend a quiet night alone, maybe catch a movie and call it an early one. But as the night wore on, I found myself feeling unsettled. It was creeping up on 2 a.m. and she still wasn't home. I thought about texting her just to check in, but I didn't want to come across as needy or controlling. After all, she was out enjoying herself. Eventually, the worry got the better of me and I gave her a call, just to hear her voice to make sure everything was okay. She answered and I could hear music in the background, voices, the sounds of a lively party. I said, "Hey, it's getting late. Do you want me to come pick you up?" There was a beat of silence, just long enough to feel strange. Then she replied, "Oh no, it's fine. I've already called a cab. I'll be home soon." Something about how she said it rubbed me the wrong way. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it was the pause, or maybe just the fact that she usually preferred me picking her up, said it made her feel safer. But I brushed it off and told her to be careful, said I'd see her when she got in. After that, I tried to get back to my movie, but the pit in my stomach kept growing. It was this gnawing feeling I couldn't shake, like some part of me already knew what I didn't want to know. I kept checking the clock. By 2:30, she still wasn't home. I kept telling myself she was probably just saying her goodbyes or waiting on the cab. But just as I was about to head upstairs, I noticed headlights pulling into our driveway. Finally, I thought, she's back. But something felt off. The taxi didn't shut off the engine and no one stepped out. I stood at the window waiting to see Emily get out, maybe give the driver a quick thanks or wave. But minute after minute passed and still, nothing. My gut was screaming. I couldn't just stand there anymore. I slipped on my shoes and stepped outside. As I approached the car, I caught a glimpse through the windshield, and my heart dropped. There was movement in the back seat. Frantic, messy, unmistakable. I could see Emily's figure in the shadows, and she wasn't alone. She was straddling some guy, her dress pushed up, their bodies pressed so close there was no mistaking what was happening. I froze. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. It felt like my chest was caving in, like my whole body had gone numb. I wanted it to be a dream. Some kind of twisted nightmare. But it wasn't. It was real, playing out right in front of me. And I snapped. I yanked the car door open, and the burst of cold air hit them hard. They both jerked in surprise. The guy didn't even have time to react before my fist connected with his face. He stumbled back, stunned. I didn't care who he was. I didn't want answers. I just wanted him gone. Then I turned to Emily. I pulled her out of that car, practically dragging her onto the pavement. She looked like a mess. Her hair was tangled, her makeup smeared all over her face, and her dress twisted in every direction. She reeked of alcohol. Her eyes were glassy, and when she looked at me, it was like she didn't even recognize who I was. She stared at me like I was a stranger. I glanced at the cab driver who was frozen in place behind the wheel, eyes wide like he didn't know whether to stay or bolt. I took a deep breath, trying to hold on to whatever self-control I had left. "Sorry, man," I muttered, voice tight. "Just give me a minute." I slammed the door shut without waiting for a response, and the driver quickly turned his gaze away, pretending not to see a thing. Then I turned to the guy still sitting in the back seat, fumbling awkwardly as he tried to zip up his pants. My jaw clenched as I stared him down. "You need to leave. Now," I said, my voice low and cold. He froze like he was still processing the situation. I stepped closer, fists clenched. I said, "Get out of the car. Now." That time he didn't wait for me to say it again. He scrambled out and took off without saying a word, not even glancing back. I turned back to Emily. She was barely upright, her body swaying, her eyes glazed over. She tried to speak, but all that came out were slurred, broken whispers I couldn't make sense of. I stood there for a second, every emotion I'd ever known clashing inside me: anger, heartbreak, betrayal, confusion. I had no idea what to say or do. Nothing felt real anymore. "Let's go," I said quietly, almost to myself. I took her by the arm and walked her toward the house. She stumbled alongside me, hardly aware of her surroundings. I couldn't even look at her. The woman I had trusted with everything had become a stranger in the space of a single night. Every belief I had about our life together had been shattered in that one moment. The next morning came, but it didn't feel like a new day. I hadn't slept at all. I just sat there in the dark, going over the images again and again. Emily in the back seat, her expression when I opened that door. It played on repeat like some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And somewhere between the silence and the heartbreak, I made up my mind. I was going to divorce her. When she finally dragged herself into the kitchen, she looked like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, her hair still a mess. She looked broken, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I had to say it. "It's over, Emily. I'm filing for divorce." Her face lost all color and she froze as if the words needed time to sink in. Then she stepped forward, hands out like she was reaching for something that wasn't there. "Mark, please," she said, her voice cracking. "Can we just talk about this?" I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. It was a mistake. I felt my hands tighten into fists at my sides. I had to fight the urge to yell. Drunk or not, that doesn't erase what happened. You don't just stumble into the back of a taxi with another man and do that. She took another step toward me, her eyes pleading. I wasn't thinking straight. It didn't mean anything. I swear it was just one terrible decision. I don't even know why it happened. "Oh, so you were drunk?" I shot back, raising my voice. "That's your excuse? Okay then. Maybe I'll get wasted tonight, bring some stranger into our bed, and you'll forgive me in the morning, as long as I don't remember it, right?" She winced like the words physically struck her. Her eyes welled up, and for a second, it looked like her knees might buckle. "Mark, please. You don't mean that. I know I hurt you. I know I did something unforgivable, but please, please just give me another chance." But her words meant nothing to me. They felt rehearsed, like she was trying to find the right string of sentences to make me forget what I'd seen. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I stepped back and shook my head. "You made your decision, Emily. Now I'm making mine." The divorce process started soon after, and it was every bit as draining as I thought it would be. It dragged on for months. Attorneys, court dates, paperwork, endless negotiations over things that once felt meaningless. Emily kept insisting she wanted to fix what we had, but the moment she realized I was serious about ending things, she lawyered up. I guess that was her way of fighting back, even while pretending she still wanted to make things work. As the weeks went by, it became less about closure and more about division. Property disputes, arguments over joint accounts, even petty debates over who would keep the car we hardly used. Each court date added more weight to my shoulders. All I wanted was to move on, to breathe again, but it felt like the process would never end. Then, during one of our hearings, something unexpected happened. Something that hit harder than all the rest. Emily's lawyer stood up with a folder in his hand and that smug little look on his face. "Your Honor," he said, glancing in my direction, "we have new evidence we'd like to submit before continuing." I had no idea what was coming, but my stomach dropped. The judge flipped through the folder slowly, his face unreadable. Then he looked over the papers, adjusted his glasses, and said in a calm, matter-of-fact tone, "It appears that the respondent, Mrs. Mitchell, is currently pregnant." The room went quiet, so quiet it felt like even the air stopped moving. I sat there in disbelief, struggling to absorb what had just been said. Pregnant? My thoughts scrambled, trying to catch up with the words echoing in my ears. I turned to Emily, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared straight ahead, hands clenched tightly together, her face drained of all color. "Your Honor," her attorney added, "given this recent development, we believe it would be appropriate to pause proceedings until a paternity test can be conducted. The outcome may affect settlement terms." My stomach sank. A paternity test. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Was she actually trying to suggest the baby could be mine? Or was this just another one of her plays, to drag things out, to muddy the waters and slow the divorce down? The judge nodded with a solemn expression. "Very well," he said. "We'll place the trial on temporary hold. The court will arrange for a DNA test, and once results are in, we'll reconvene." I just sat there stunned. I had spent weeks trying to prepare myself for closure, for the final chapter of what used to be our life together. But now, suddenly, I was back in limbo. I looked at Emily again, hoping to catch some sign of what was going through her head, but her face was unreadable. Nothing in her expression gave me anything. I didn't know if I was angry, betrayed, confused, or all three. I just knew this wasn't over, not yet. A few days later I got the call. They scheduled my appointment for the DNA test. The entire experience felt surreal. Walking into that sterile clinic, filling out paperwork like it was just another task on a to-do list. I couldn't fully wrap my head around what was happening. Emily was pregnant. And now I had to find out if that child was mine. The actual test took just a few minutes, a quick swab inside my cheek, and then it was done. But waiting for that result felt like an eternity. I sat in the waiting room with my thoughts racing, flipping back through every memory of the past few months, trying to pinpoint if there was any chance this could have been mine. I couldn't even remember the last time we'd been truly intimate. Still, I didn't want to believe she'd lie about something this big. But I had no control over any of it now. I just had to wait. And wait. And in that time I barely slept, barely ate. The only thing I could do was hope. Hope that this was just one last desperate move on her part, and not something even more complicated. Then the day came. I walked back into that courtroom with my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Emily was already seated beside her lawyer, looking calm, almost serene, like this was just another formality. I tried not to look at her. I just wanted it to be over. The judge entered, went through a few opening notes, and then turned to the clerk, who handed him a sealed envelope. I felt every muscle in my body tense as he tore it open and unfolded the paper. His face didn't change. He read through it silently, then glanced up, first at me, then at Emily. "The results of the paternity test have been reviewed," he said, his voice steady. "And the court confirms that Mr. Mitchell is not the biological father of the unborn child." It hit me like a punch to the chest. I don't know what I expected to feel. Rage, sadness, relief, but what came over me was a strange, hollow emptiness. I wasn't the father. That chapter was closed. And with it, any last thread connecting me to Emily emotionally had snapped. I looked over at her. For the first time in this whole ordeal, she cracked. Her face went pale and her eyes filled with tears. She looked down, struggling to keep her composure, but I had no sympathy left to give. The judge continued, "We'll proceed with finalizing the divorce. Any matters concerning the unborn child will be handled separately." But I barely heard the rest. I was already drifting, mentally and emotionally. Emily had let me believe there was even a possibility this child was mine. Whether out of fear or manipulation, I still don't know. But whatever her reasons, the damage was done. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized. It should have felt like the weight had finally lifted, but it didn't. Not right away. Mostly I just felt empty. Numb. The woman I had once trusted more than anyone had become someone I didn't recognize. But at least it was over. I could finally start the slow process of rebuilding. Then, a few days after everything was signed and settled, Emily texted me. She said she'd be stopping by the house to collect the last of her things. I hadn't planned on being there. I figured it would be easier that way, but she asked if we could talk. A part of me wanted to ignore her, just leave it alone. But another part of me, buried somewhere deep, still wanted answers. Some piece of truth. Some kind of closure. She stepped through the front door slowly, her eyes drifting across the living room like she was trying to take it all in one last time. I guess in a way she was. Emily didn't say much at first, just a few awkward attempts at small talk, which I had no interest in entertaining. I just wanted her to collect her things and go. After everything, I didn't owe her a conversation. But eventually she stopped fidgeting with the box in her hands and looked at me, visibly nervous. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling a little, "about the baby? I know the test showed you're not the father, but the truth is, I don't even know who the father is." I stared at her, stunned. "What are you talking about?" I asked, barely keeping my voice level. "You told me it was one mistake." You said you were drunk. Are you seriously saying you don't even know who it was? That there were others? She froze. For a second, it looked like she wished she could rewind time and swallow those words back down. Her face went pale and panic flickered in her eyes. She hadn't meant to admit it, but now it was out. And there was no taking it back. I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. So it wasn't just that one night in the taxi, I said, my voice cold and measured. It wasn't a one-time thing. There were others, weren't there? She opened her mouth like she wanted to explain, but nothing came out. No denial. No defense. Just silence, and in that silence, everything I needed to know was confirmed. The baby wasn't just the result of one careless night, it was the consequence of a pattern I never saw coming. We stood there, frozen in that moment. I couldn't even put my feelings into words: anger, disappointment, maybe disgust. But most of all, I felt like I'd been played. She had dragged me through emotional hell, pretending there was still something to salvage, when she hadn't even been honest about the worst of it. I can't believe this, I said, shaking my head slowly. You had every chance to come clean. Every chance to tell me the truth. Instead, you let me believe we were still something worth fighting for. She didn't respond. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her lips trembling. But whatever guilt she felt now, it didn't matter. It couldn't change what had already happened. Just get your stuff, Emily, I said flatly, turning away from her. I don't want to hear anything else. We're done. She moved quietly around the room, gathering the last of her belongings. When she was finished, she walked out without another word. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't want to give her that kind of closure. When the door finally clicked shut, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. But the ache of betrayal lingered. That wouldn't go away so easily. It was a quiet Saturday evening not long after, and I was doing my best to settle into some kind of routine again. The house felt emptier, sure, but it also felt peaceful. I'd curled up on the couch with a movie, trying to lose myself in anything other than memories, when I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. At first, I didn't pay it much attention. Cars came and went all the time. But a few minutes passed and the engine was still running. Curious, I peeked out the window. There was a taxi parked at the curb. Just sitting there. No one getting out, no door opening. Just idling. It made my stomach twist a little. After waiting a few more minutes and still seeing no movement, I stepped outside to investigate. I approached the car and knocked gently on the driver's window. It rolled down slowly, and I instantly recognized him. It was the same driver. The one from that night. The one who had seen everything. He looked at me and I could tell from his eyes that he remembered me too. He hesitated, clearly unsure of whether to speak, but then he did. Sorry to show up like this, he said quietly. I've been thinking about that night, when I drove your wife home. There's something you should probably know. My gut tightened the moment he said those words. Part of me didn't want to know, didn't want to add more weight to the betrayal, but I couldn't walk away, not now. What is it? I asked, trying to steady my voice. The driver glanced around like he wasn't sure if he should even be talking. Then he leaned in a bit, lowering his voice. Look, I don't want to cause trouble or anything, but I overheard something that night. Your wife, she was pretty out of it. And she wasn't exactly keeping her voice down. My pulse started to climb. Go on. She was on the phone with that guy, he said, his tone cautious. The one who was in the back seat with her. She was giggling, talking about how exciting it was to sneak around, saying stuff like, he has no clue. He's so trusting. I clenched my jaw, already feeling the blood rush to my ears. But then, the driver added, she said something that stuck with me, something I don't think she realized she said out loud. What did she say? I asked, barely above a whisper. He took a slow breath, looking like he hated being the one to say it. She said she was using your money. That everything, the rides, the dinners, the hotels, it was all on your dime. She laughed and said something like, it's perfect. He's basically paying for all my fun. He paused, shaking his head. At first I thought it was just talk. But after that night, seeing you, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. All that time, our joint account, our savings, I thought we were building a future. Turns out I was funding her double life. And one more thing, he said, hesitating. She mentioned the guy with her wasn't the only one. She said something about having backups, guys she could call if she needed a change of pace. Like it was some kind of rotation. I staggered back a step. I felt sick. Like every shred of dignity I had left had been yanked away. She didn't just cheat, she turned it into a lifestyle. A pattern. She was out there laughing, using my money to bankroll her affairs like it was all some kind of game. I stood in stunned silence, not sure what to say. But the driver just looked at me, guilt in his eyes. I know this ain't my place. But I figured you deserve the truth. Whatever that's worth. I forced a nod. Thanks, I said, though it felt like the word came from someone else's mouth. He gave me a look, somewhere between pity and respect, then rolled up the window and drove off into the night. I stood there, frozen, watching his taillights vanish down the road, while everything inside me burned. The betrayal I thought I understood now had a whole new layer. She didn't just break my heart, she mocked me while doing it. She took everything we built, twisted it, and used it to feed her ego, to entertain herself. And I'd been completely blind to it. That night changed something in me. I knew I was done with the lies, the damage, the games. Emily had dragged me through the mud, and all while smiling to my face. She thought she could walk away clean. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. If she wanted to play dirty, I was going to show her what that really meant. I needed a plan. And it had to be flawless. This wasn't about lashing out. I didn't want a scene. I wanted a reckoning. I wanted her to feel every ounce of the hurt she thought she got away with. And I wasn't going to do it alone. I hired a private investigator. A professional. No drama, just facts. I told him to dig into everything. Every name, every late-night meeting, every quiet transaction. He didn't ask many questions, just nodded and got to work. And within a week he delivered. What he found was worse than I imagined. It wasn't just one guy in a taxi. It wasn't even 2 or 3. Emily had created an entire network of flings, and none of them were accidental. There were coworkers, a personal trainer, even someone from a mutual friend group, someone I'd sat across from at dinners, joked with, clinked glasses with. All while he was sneaking around with my wife behind my back. It wasn't chaos. It was organized, planned, cold. I remember staring at the file the investigator gave me, page after page, photo after photo, and just feeling numb. Each one a new reminder that I'd been living with a stranger. A stranger who had treated our marriage like a convenience, like a cover. I spent several days just sitting with it all, flipping through the files the detective had gathered page by page, letting each revelation fuel the fire building inside me. I didn't want to lash out recklessly. No, this wasn't going to be some heated confrontation. This was going to be surgical. Clean. Ruthless. They thought they could sneak around, walk all over me, and walk away untouched. They had no idea what was coming. I knew where to begin. Emily. She had always held on to this pristine image, crafted so carefully over the years. To everyone else she was polished, respected, adored. The woman who hosted the perfect dinner party, who smiled sweetly in public and played the part of the devoted wife. That mask she wore was everything to her. So that's what I decided to take. I gathered every scrap of evidence. Photos, screenshots of messages, receipts, timestamps. I printed out the most damning messages, the kind of stuff you'd never want to end up in the wrong hands. Then I packaged it all together, neat and professional, and mailed copies to every corner of her life. Her colleagues, her close friends, even people from our shared social circle. I didn't do it anonymously, I made sure they knew it came from me. I wanted them to know this was the truth. The real Emily. The effect was immediate. People started distancing themselves. Friends stopped answering her calls. Events she used to be the center of suddenly didn't have a place for her. She tried to spin the story, tried to blame me or the stress of the divorce. But it was useless. The damage was done. Her perfect little world began to unravel, thread by thread. But I wasn't done. Her lovers had played their part in this circus, and I had every intention of making sure they paid too. One of them was a guy from her office, someone I used to think of as just another name at holiday parties. Turns out he was more than that. I sent a packet of evidence to his supervisor, along with details about how he had been spending work hours pursuing Emily. Within a week he was out. Fired. Just like that. Then there was the personal trainer, the charming, overly friendly guy who'd always seemed a little too invested in her fitness routine. I made sure his clients got wind of the kind of training sessions he'd been scheduling on the side. He lost several key clients overnight. I heard through the grapevine that he tried switching gyms, but I sent the same evidence to his new employer before he even finished his first week. The hardest one to reach was the guy from our mutual circle, the one who smiled in my face while sneaking around behind my back. He had a wife, kids. Played the devoted family man at every get-together. But I knew exactly where to hit him. I sent everything, every screenshot, every receipt, every photo, to his wife, packaged with a letter that explained just enough. I didn't stick around to see the fallout, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that she left him, took the kids, and drained the joint account on her way out. And Emily? I wasn't about to let her off the hook financially either. During the divorce, I'd done everything I could to safeguard my savings, isolate my assets, and shift as much of the shared debt back onto her as possible. But I wanted to go a step further. I knew she had racked up expenses behind my back, credit cards, charges linked to our joint accounts that were never for us. So I had those traced and, where possible, reassigned to her. Luxury purchases, hotel bills, car services, all of it. I made sure the creditors knew where to find her. Her car? Repossessed. Her spa memberships, her designer bags, her travel plans? Gone. She was left with the wreckage, mountains of bills, a ruined reputation, and an empty calendar where her social life used to be. And while she struggled to rebuild from the fallout she caused, I finally felt something I hadn't in a long time: relief. The people she betrayed me with had their own messes to clean up, but I didn't care anymore. They were out of my life, just ghosts from a past I had finally burned down. I know it might sound cruel to some. Maybe it was. But I don't regret a second of it. For the first time in months, I felt like I had taken back control of my life. I wasn't just someone's doormat. I was done playing the fool. I know there are people out there who'd say I went too far. That I should have walked away, let it all go, and moved on with my life. And maybe they're right. But after everything they put me through, the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation, I needed them to understand that choices have consequences. They played their game, and now they were learning what it felt like to lose. It had been a few weeks since I'd set everything in motion. The storm had hit, and I was finally starting to breathe again. I had begun to rebuild, quietly, slowly, finding peace in the silence that used to feel so empty. I thought the worst was behind me. But then I started hearing whispers. It started with little things: comments from mutual acquaintances, texts from friends who still had a foot in both social circles. Even my private investigator reached out to tell me he'd picked up on some unsettling noise in the background. It seemed that Emily's entourage, those men she'd entertained behind my back, weren't taking their downfall lightly. One by one they were turning on her. Blaming her. Not quietly either. The guy from her office, the one who lost his job after his boss saw the proof? He'd been flooding her phone with furious texts. Angry, unstable messages saying she had destroyed his career and ruined his life. He wasn't just upset, he was vengeful. He even said he'd make her pay for what she'd done. Then there was the gym trainer. After losing most of his clients, his income dried up almost overnight. According to what I heard, he was telling anyone who'd listened that Emily had manipulated him, pushed for more than just workouts, and used him as some kind of emotional escape. He showed up at her place more than once, pounding on the door, demanding she fix what happened to his life. When she didn't answer, he didn't stop, just sent more messages, each one more aggressive than the last. And the guy from our social group, the one who had the most to lose? After his wife packed up and left with the kids, he completely unraveled. Drinking heavily, acting out, spiraling. People said he was barely functioning. But what really made my skin crawl was hearing that he, too, had started sending threats to Emily. Desperate, enraged. He blamed her for everything, said if she couldn't give him his family back, he'd make sure her life fell apart just as badly. The worst part? A few of them had found each other. Online, through mutual connections. They'd started comparing notes, realizing they weren't the only ones caught in her web. They bonded over the destruction she'd left in her wake, feeding off each other's anger. From what I heard, they'd started talking about making her pay together. As if they were forming some twisted alliance, united by the damage she'd done to each of them. When I first heard about the threats, I didn't know what to feel. A part of me, if I'm honest, felt a strange sense of satisfaction. They had played a role in tearing apart my life. They had laughed behind my back, enjoyed the thrill of deception, and now it was coming back to haunt them. But there was another part of me, quiet, uneasy, that couldn't ignore how far this had gone. I had set fire to her house of lies, but now the flames were spreading. I'd wanted to destroy the illusion, to show the truth. I hadn't expected it to spiral into something this dangerous. And then there was Emily. I kept wondering how she was coping now that the walls were caving in. The very people she had thrown our life away for were turning against her. Not just leaving, threatening, accusing, harassing. I imagined her sitting alone, reading those messages, realizing just how far she'd fallen. And maybe that should have brought me peace. Maybe it did, in a way. But I also realized something else. She wasn't in control anymore. The puppeteer had lost her strings. Whatever power she thought she had, whatever charm or manipulation she used, it wasn't working anymore. The people she once toyed with were now unhinged, unpredictable, dangerous. And for the first time since this all began, I started to question the thing that had driven me for so long. Revenge. I had crafted it carefully, patiently, with intention. But now it was moving on its own like a fire I couldn't put out. I don't know where this ends. Maybe it already has. Or maybe for Emily, it's only just beginning. But as for me, I'm finally stepping away from the wreckage. And I'm not looking back. Months had passed since everything came crashing down, and for the first time in what felt like years there was peace. No more late nights pacing the floor. No more sleepless questions running in circles through my head. The betrayal, the anger, the chaos. It was behind me now like a storm that had finally moved on. I'd taken back control of my life, piece by piece, and I could finally breathe again. The noise surrounding Emily, her lovers, their fallout, the mess they all made, had slowly faded into background static. I stopped keeping track of what was happening in their world. I didn't care if the gym trainer ever found new clients, or if the guy from her office landed on his feet, or if the married friend pieced his family back together. And as for Emily, I didn't even know where she was anymore. I didn't ask, and no one volunteered the information. She'd become nothing more than a shadow in my memory, someone I used to know. I'd moved into a smaller place. Nothing fancy, just quiet, simple mine. There were no reminders of the life I'd left behind. No old furniture, no shared keepsakes. Just clean walls, new beginnings. I started doing the things I used to enjoy, the things I forgot I even liked. I picked up books again, took long hikes on the weekends, even taught myself a few new recipes. I wasn't just healing, I was rediscovering myself. I reached out to old friends, the ones I'd drifted from while I was caught in the middle of that mess. They welcomed me back like I'd never left. And slowly I started going out again, not to escape but to reconnect. To be human again. It wasn't about chasing happiness but finding stillness. I'd learned that real peace comes quietly, and when it does, you don't want to lose it. The truth is, I don't think about Emily anymore. Not in anger, not in sadness, just not at all. There was a time when she was in every corner of my mind, a wound I couldn't stop touching. But that time passed. She became a name on old documents, a face in photos I no longer keep. I never heard from her again, and I was okay with that. Maybe she found a way to clean up her life. Maybe she didn't. But her choices aren't mine to carry anymore. She has her story. I've got mine. Funny how things work out. I thought losing my marriage meant losing everything I'd built. But it turned out to be the foundation for something new, something better. I went through the fire and I came out on the other side stronger, clearer, free. I don't know what's ahead. I'm not trying to map it all out. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to find out. And for now, that's more than enough.